Well, thank you for staying with us on the AM show. It is that time of the morning where I share with you my blunt thoughts. And today I've titled it Dumsor Looming, Democracy Blooming, and Election 2024 Brewing. My take. Dumsor Looming. Can I do this again? Dumsor Looming, Democracy Blooming, and Election 2024 Brewing. My take. So therefore, I'm going to start today's session not by going straight to this, but by saluting Christian Atsu. How quickly we forget. He's passed on, but that late Ghanaian football player, he had a dream of building an orphanage school. It has finally come to fruition thanks to some entities that have helped him get to that point. His former teams in the English Premiership, among others, have helped him to get to this point. I'm talking about Chelsea. I'm talking about the likes of Newcastle United, among others, contributing a sum of about £40,000 for the construction. This is in Senyabreku, and I am so glad, so happy that his ambition, his plan, has come to fruition. Chelsea FC, for example, played a vital part by auctioning jerseys worn by their players, with the proceeds going towards the completion of the school through the charity organization Arms Around the Child, of which Atsu was a member, a patron, an ambassador. So that's how I'd like to start my blunt thoughts this morning, by saluting the man, Christian Atsu. Even now that he's left us in physical form, his legacy, his impact still remains. And this is what all of us should be aiming at doing, including our politicians, especially those who are thieves. I'm not saying all of them, but if you know you are in the thieving group, you are lining your pockets every day when your people are out there bleeding. A man for bleeding and I will feel it. Okay, someday all of us will have to give account. Like the Bible says, it is appointed unto man to die once, and after death, judgment. That is where I'll start from. But then I'll go to the IPP situation. And Ghana, for this morning, I have two things to say to President Akufo-Addo. Two things. You remember that song? Dorime. We don't want to bamba with these IPPs. We don't want to play that game. We don't want to chill with the big boys, because right now, not just our fingers, our entire hands are in their mouths. And if they choose to bite, we're in trouble. The second bit I want to remind Akufo-Addo of, our president. When Dumsor, the major one, happened under the NDC, for those years, for that period, all of us lamented. All of us felt the pinch. No one can say he or she did not. Child, adult, we all felt it. And we all bashed the system for what happened, vigorously, ferociously. So remember, we've been experiencing power outages, but not on a major scale. If you don't fix this and we go back, let me remind you, Abana yedebo enchino, enwan yededen yedebo ba, no discrimination. It will even be worse for your administration because someone solved a problem that had accrued over decades. And you came, and instead of dealing continuously with the problem, because our population is increasing, if you sit down for the problem to come back, then who is more irresponsible? That is what I'm going to just premise my take on. I'll go back to the IPP bit, but let me come to the slides here. In terms of the energy sector and the IPPs, look at that, 1.73 billion. And shortly, I'll be sharing with you what a highly placed source has been sharing with us. 1.73 billion in IPP debt. And in terms of our general energy sector debt, over $2 billion. Over $2 billion. Let's go to the next slide. Now, if you look at the average annual debt accumulation, which is where maybe our thinking caps have not been worn, the average annual excess capacity payment is $500 million, a staggering $500 million. And the average annual debt accumulation, $1 billion. It means practically every year you have a deficit of about 500 million. How is that sustainable? We knew we were going to get here, and we have. How do we deal with the problem now? Let's go to the next slide. Now, if you look at the IPP's share of thermal generation capacity, this is where the real game is played. 9 of those thermal plants are held by IPPs in total, 9 of them. Of that, 3 have shut down already. You probably didn't know that. 3 are gone. And if you put all 9 together, now you look at the 65% they are generating in total. And you see how dramatic it would be if we lost them on board. Let's go to the next slide. But in terms of all of this, what has the rhetoric been from government? Yes, the ECG, but yes, it is part of the administrative arm of this government because they also feed into that. And it is not just as though the ECG were on its own. That is not the case. In fact, these negotiations and the rest, when they are being entered into, it is government. That is why we'll have the lovely figure of our first gentleman, President Akufo-Addo, here. What has he been saying? Avail yourself for or to debt restructuring. But it's not every debt you can restructure. Look at even our domestic debt exchange program. Look at how bloody, so to speak, it was. Look at how tricky it was. We're sitting on pins and needles. Even now, we still are. Now look at the IPPs. They are saying, do not touch our money. Don't play with our money. And in a way, Ghana, you have to understand what the IPPs are saying. The fuel they use to power our systems and produce energy for us is bought. The equipment they use is bought. The technical know-how, the people who work there are also paid for. They don't get them out of air. So someone must pay for that. Now we have a take or pay arrangement. You don't have a take and pay arrangement for now. You have a take or pay arrangement, which we could have worked with in the first place. We had excess capacity. What did we do with that? I always kept saying, you say you have excess. Now it's been about 2 years. We no longer have excess on the back of our population burgeoning. Now we have just about what we need. We in fact need a little more in terms of generational capacity. But we waited. And now we are sitting ducks. That is the problem. Now the IPPs are saying, don't touch our money. In fact, logically, how can they operate if they don't have anything in the kitty? So out of the sum of money has been increasing. From around 1.4 billion, 1.5, now it's $1.73 billion. And they are calling for about 30%. Let's go to the next slide before I come back. And then you would look at Dumsor in retrospect. Look at this. Ghana experienced Dumsor for 159 days in 2015. That's according to an Al Jazeera report. Dumsor, the persistent on and off cycling of electricity resulted in job losses, a decline in welfare, and a threat to electoral security in 2016. The source, the Institute of Social Research, that's the Center for Political Science, University of Michigan. Just contemplate that, Ghana, look at these. Job losses, decline in welfare, and I can't even bring that in an encapsulated form. You know exactly what that means. Some of your hospital facilities could go off. And if they don't have generational capacity or plants or something, that could mean lives lost. Talk of schools, talk of commercial, entities, businesses, talk of homes, the impact when you don't have light. Let's just cogitate these. Let's just reflect. Because it's just a few years ago that we were here. Now, we know now that a highly placed JoyNews source, right, has been revealing that government is assuring that there will be no power outages. The energy minister has said that. The president has said that as a result of power plants being shut down by these IPPs. But you see, there are more dynamics at play. Because they have said that by the end of this month, by the end of today, in fact, from tomorrow, they're going to cut themselves off. That is what their leadership has been saying. This comes on the back of the threats that I'm talking to you about from the chamber of the IPPs. And according to this source, at least AXA has engaged and hopefully they will not go down the same road. We cannot guarantee that they will not go down this road. And if they do, what does that mean for us? This is what we have to be reflecting on Ghana for. Because all of these that we're seeing, job losses, decline in welfare, threat to electoral security in 2016, could be our reality sooner rather than later. I'm not a doomsday prophet. But Mr. President, like I said, the same stick we used to hit former President Mahama is the same one we used to hit you. In fact, a bigger one. You know why? Because it would be even more irresponsible if someone solved the problem. Then you came and you couldn't add up. You couldn't do anything about what was a problem that had been solved, and now we go back into a problem. We slip back into it. It means you've been even more irresponsible. And you can't be pardoned for that. Let's go to the next slide. Now from Dumsor, let's go to the next slide. I would like us to take a look at Assin North. I spoke about democracy blooming, remember? Look at these dynamics. When you look at the NDC and the MPP and over time, how they have fared in Assin North, you would see the MPP, in fact, the NDC, 63%, and then dwindling fortunes all the way from 2000, 2004, some appreciation in 2012, 51.6% with Ambrose Samuel, and then another steep decline to 39.2% in 2016, then a rise again in 2020, and of course, that was with James Jachi Quayson, 55.2%, and now even more votes in 2023's by-election, 57.56%. That's an increment of over 2.3 percentage points. Then you look at the MPP. Of course, in 1992, they didn't even have representation. They declined, and so the NDC had all the seats. But then in 1996, they gradually started working, 34.7%. Then they took over in 2000, 56.6%. At that time, there was only one area, the Assin area, and the member of parliament was Kennedy Ohene Ejapon. And we know that when the split was made, northern, southern, and central, then there was a split, and he took the central seat, Assin Central. He retained in 2004, and then we saw that decline in 2008, but then from there, it's been pretty checkered. Between the two parties, they've split the Assin area over time. Let's go to the next slide. But then if you look at the trajectory right before the by-election, that is where it becomes crucial. Because look, some of the projects that were happening before the Assin North by-election, the commissioning of a 31.2 kilometer road from Assin Fosu to Assin Praso, the alleged giving out of between 20 cedis and 200 cedis to voters, the alleged sharing of cutlasses, weedicides, and pesticides to voters. Let's start from here. Some of these roads and others were being constructed. But just as in the Kumau situation, right before the by-election, massive moves there. I'm not saying these were not in the works, but what was behind it? It is almost as though our politicians thought that they could buy people's consciences by doing this. But of course, you know that if they're only running to you when there's a by-election, they don't take you that seriously, do they? There's also the alleged giving out of between 20 cedis and 200 cedis to voters. I find this excruciating, egregious. Why? It means basically they think, again, that with a little sum of money, the mere crumbs, the barest crumbs, your conscience can be bought. Your thinking cap can be taken off. Our politicians have to come to the reality that people are becoming more discerning. Look at that, 20 cedis to go and vote for somebody. Now, while I don't subscribe to people taking those sums of money, I do concede that if some people, like they came and said, Charles Opoku no Yedi, they took the money, yet they voted their conscience. It is criminal to do that, but the fact that they voted their conscience sends a message. Because some people are waking up to the reality, and they will not sell their birthright. Then the alleged sharing of cutlasses, weedicides, and pesticides to voters. Now, this is how, it's a farming community, by the way, so if you don't get why cutlasses, weedicides, and pesticides are relevant, that is why. Gradually, our politicians will be forced to learn from either side, because we hear that both sides were dishing out money and all of that. Well, you will have to learn, because the people are becoming more smart. They are waking up to your nefarious ways. Let's go to the next slide. But then, even as we talk about democracy blooming, we must also look at Fitch's prediction ahead of 2024. Now, the NDC is most likely to win the 2024 presidential elections. That's according to Fitch. Now, this wouldn't be the first time they've waded into this fray. The EIU, Fitch, and others have always been, over time, coming up with these. And one political party will like it, one will not like it, depending on where they sit on this political spectrum. When the NPP is in power, they don't like it when it's painted like this. When the NDC is in power, they don't like it when it's painted like this. But let's look at the dynamics that Fitch looks at. The rapid deterioration of economic conditions in 2022, I don't need to do overkill on that. You know better than I do. Slow progress in the fight against perceived corruption. As for this one, corruption has beaten us blue, black, yellow, red. In fact, that is one of the pains I feel when I contemplate the Akufo-Addo administration. The Anas principle has been thrown to the dogs. But he said it. I didn't put it in Mr. President's mouth. The Afrobarometer study showing that 85% of Ghanaians believed the government was doing a poor job in tackling corruption. Now, if you think I'm being hard, 85%, that leaves a window of 15% of people, some of whom think maybe you're doing the right thing, and others who will sit on the fence. 85%. 15%, that is a fail grade. Now, this will exacerbate anti-incumbency sentiment among the electorate. And let me add, not just those, like I said before, and maybe the next slide, the final slide, will explain better. Like I said before, this Dumsor thing, President Akufo-Addo, let's not get there. Because if we do, wahala don't come. It would be the death knell, the nail in the coffin for your administration and its future. No one wants to get there, because if I get there, imagine waking up. You don't even know when the light will come for you to iron. You have to come to work. All those dynamics. You are in the dark. You could hit your head. So many things. You're in the bathroom, no light. I mean, for those who may not have generators, power plants, and all of that, this would be our reality. And of course, crime as well. Because when there are no street lights, or even worse, there are street lights with no electricity and all of that poor lighting, crime also feeds in. Mr. President, the Assin North by-election has happened. But is that reflective? Is it a litmus test for 2024? Your actions between now and then will determine that. I pray for you, Mr. President. While I may be hard on you, I still pray for you that you will be able to get things right. But if you don't, then of course, you know what the consequences will be. My name is Benjamin Akakpo. These are my blunt thoughts shared with you this morning, raw, hot, and edited, undiluted. And as always, let's keep praying for Ghana, that God will make us great and strong.